milestone this is. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 100th episode of the Baseline Jumper podcast. I can't believe we're here. Jason Goldstein, that's my name. On the line with me right now, my partner, co-host, and dear friend, Ben McDonald. Ben, happy 100th episode, my brother.
It's unbelievable. Don't call it a comeback. We've been here for 100 episodes, and we're staying around. It has been a pleasure, Jason. We've had, I was going to say ups and downs, but there really haven't been all that many downs, Jason. I mean, it's been shockingly ups. It's been mostly just ups, and I couldn't be happier to do this show with you.
Ditto, my friend. I mean, look, we both work full-time jobs. You have a family at home. I have cats. You know, it's like we work full-time and then we do this once a week and we put so much effort into it, whether it's editing and posting or writing up the show notes. I mean, so there's days where we're tired and the energy level's low and we still push through. So we wanted to thank all of you right at the top of the show for sticking with us throughout this journey. If you've listened to every episode, you deserve a Medal of Honor. But yeah, 100 episodes. And I think throughout the night, Ben and I are going to kind of weave in some of our favorite moments that we've had throughout the history of the show, which started in early November of 2017, believe it or not. I still have the audio on my laptop of our first episode. And to think of how far we've come since then, it's just awesome to look back on. And I'm excited to see what the future holds, man. But 100 episodes, holy cow.
I know. It's unbelievable. It's been quite a ride. And Jason, when we're talking about quite a ride, there's really only one way we can go that's up from here. It's a high point, you might say, of the show. Dion Waiters.
I was hoping you were going here.
Oh my gosh, Jason, this is my favorite story of the season already. And I don't know. Brian Colangelo is my favorite NBA story of the decade, but this is going to be top 5 for me. Dion Waiters. Can you just talk to the people? I mean, I can't even do it, Jason. You have to. Can you talk about Dion Waiters in getting in trouble, freaking out on this airplane? I can't do it justice.
Well, first off, I want to preface this by saying that, you know, we've touched on marijuana and the NBA briefly throughout our podcast, and I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's no secret that some players may choose to partake in that activity, which is fine as long as they're not getting drug tested. I think it's going to be legalized soon anyway. But this, Ben, this just takes this to a whole nother level. The fact that the Miami Heat were boarding a plane and an unnamed teammate, by the way, kudos to Dion Waiters for not throwing the teammate under the bus that gave him this edible that had marijuana in it. And he just had a freak out on the plane. He was laying on the floor. They had to take him to the hospital afterwards. I mean, this story is bonkers. Have you ever thought in all your years talking and covering basketball, Ben, that we would see a 10-game suspension for conduct detrimental to the team over an edible? I mean, like, how much of a detriment was he on this plane ride? I mean, if I could be a fly on the wall of this aircraft and to see what Waiters was doing, I mean, I get it. It's kind of serious because they didn't know at first that it was an edible. They just thought it was, you know, a panic attack or something like that. But to find out later that it was brought upon or brought on by an edible, I mean, that just makes the story hilarious, doesn't it?
I mean, he ate too many gummies. Can you imagine having to explain to someone even 5 years ago that he overdosed on gummies, Jason? I mean, it's preposterous. He's going to lose $2 million because he made poor choices with eating his edibles, apparently passed out on the plane. I mean, we've all been there. But, I mean, it's also that it happened to Dion Waiters, who has just got kind of a unique place in the NBA. I mean, of course it's Dion Waiters. So that is, I mean, it's an incredible story. I've got to know who else was involved in this. Was there a bet, Jason? Did he do this on his own volition? Did someone bet him to eat more gummies? Did he just not know that they were as strong as they are? There's so many questions, Jason. I mean, there was the J.R. Smith soup throw a few years ago, and this is the other story that I have so many questions. I want to know the details.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get them. I mean, maybe it'll come out in a 30 for 30 in 5 years. What if I told you that Kelly Olynyk slipped Dion Waiters an edible and said, "Eat the whole thing, or Jimmy Butler's going to make us run sprints at 3 o'clock in the morning." This is the story of the $2 million edible, a Dion Waiters documentary. Like, I could just picture this right now. There might be a movie made on this subject. I can't believe it. Like,
Kelly
this
Olynyk's
probably,
a good guess too. I mean, that guy
yeah,
looks like he's seen his way around a couple edibles in his life, you know?
yeah, and it couldn't be Justice Winslow because his name is too close to the justice system. Or maybe it was Jimmy Butler and he was like, "Dude, you're not blaming me. Blame it on anyone else on the roster." I don't know. Listen, it could have been Bam Adebayo and edible. I know I used that joke last week when I said Adebayo was sandwich, but I had to bring it back. I mean, the possibilities are endless, man. But I think this is better than Amari Stoudemire punching a fire extinguisher. I think this is better than J.R. Smith throwing soup. Like, this might be the funniest, serious NBA story I've ever seen.
Yeah,
And we've
and I
seen
think
stuff in this league.
Kelly Olynyk is the minus 200 favorite of the guy who this was happening with. If you look at the roster, also I love that this happened to a Heat player because you know that Spoelstra is just furious about this right now. He has those guys in peak condition. He prides himself on making sure that there's this Miami culture, and of all the teams in the league to have this happen to, it's the Heat. So I have a feeling Dion Waiters might not see the floor as much as he wanted to. I mean, Kendrick Nunn had already stolen a lot of his minutes, so this might be kind of the end of the road for Dion in Miami. But that's great. It's a great way to start. It's kind of upbeat, even though it's a little sad for Dion. On a little bit less positive note, Jason, David Fizdale may be nearing the end of his rope in New York.
Well, do you remember when you said on our season preview that no head coach was getting fired? That was your bold prediction.
Yeah.
I feel like after this story broke, I mean, Fizdale has to go, doesn't he? And look, I'm not a Knicks fan by any stretch of the imagination, but when you start 2-8 and then you have Scott Perry and Steve Mills racing to the podium to meet the media after their loss to the Cavs on Sunday night at the Garden, saying, "Well, this isn't right. This isn't the start we wanted. We're not getting the results." Look, I don't believe Fizdale should be fired because I don't think he was given an NBA roster with the 24 power forwards that they have. This is more on the front office and the construction of the team, and I just think they're making Fizdale their fall guy. I mean, it's gotten Stephen A. Smith so outraged to the point where he looked like he was going to have an aneurysm on live TV when he was talking about this. I mean, this is a sad story. We knew the Knicks were going to be bad. I mean, you pegged them to be awful. I thought they'd at least be competitive, but their roster is not gelling. Their guards are not giving them enough. And I know they've been hit with some tragedy. You know, Dennis Smith Jr. missed 2 weeks, and Reggie Bullock's been away from the team, and Elfrid Payton's been banged up. So they don't really have a full complement of players for us to gauge how bad this team actually is. But 10 games in the season, in your second year as a head coach, when you're supposed to be a developmental head coach, an organization going through a rebuild, you do not sit here 1/8 into the season, Ben, and throw your head coach under the bus like that. I mean, how do you mend that fence with Fizdale? If they're going to fire him, just do it already. Don't leave this guy hanging like a lame duck when the Knicks are 1 to 2 years away from contention. That's not fair to him. Fizdale chose the Knicks job, and I'm going to let you go right now, Ben, I promise, over the likes of Memphis, Charlotte, Phoenix. 2 years ago, there were so many openings, and he chose the Knicks. They're a big market team. They play at the Garden. I don't think it's right for the organization to treat Fizdale the way they're treating him.
I mean, it just, you know what it is more than even that? It's just nonsensical because ultimately, I've seen this movie as a Bulls fan. It doesn't make sense to fire your coach 10 games into the season. If you fire them 10 games into the season, you should have fired them in the offseason when you could have hired another head coach. If you fire them 10 games into the season, you're replacing them now with an assistant coach who will be on an interim head coaching basis, who may just end up leaving after the season. What value does that bring? The answer, because that is a rhetorical question, is none. It adds no value to your team. You should never really consider doing this because you shoot yourself in the foot. So for the Knicks, I do think that a guy like Alvin Gentry, he's someone who, his seat's getting pretty hot. The Pelicans were expected to compete. They're not doing that. a team like the Knicks, I mean, this is, when healthy, one of the worst two rosters in the league. I mean, it was them and Charlotte might be better than them. Now, Golden State's making their case with injuries, but this is a terrible roster. There is not a superstar to be found. You could make the case that there's not a future all-star on this team. I mean, that really depends on how you feel about RJ Barrett, but none of the other guys on this team have shown that they are going to be future all-stars. So ultimately, when you're this young, you have this little talent, and it's such a mishmash of, as you mentioned, so many power forwards. They don't really have the right guy to be point guard. RJ Barrett's having to play point guard. I mean, it's a mess. I don't know what they were expecting of Fizdale, but it's really not his fault as far as how this goes. And ultimately, if you're the Knicks, you don't fire your head coach 10 games into the season, because that means you thought about firing him before the season started. And if that's the case, you just look hapless and incompetent as a franchise, which is nothing new for the Knicks, quite frankly.
Well, the Cavs fired Ty Lue 6 games into last year, and they were in the finals the year before. So anything is possible in the NBA. But, on the list of potential hot seat coaches coming into the season, I mean, we didn't even mention Fizdale. It is absolutely not justifiable to fire him this early. Okay, but now, I mean, how do you keep him? How is he going to coach and be better for the struggling Knicks team, knowing that Perry and Mills are looking over his shoulder and just looking for the right cause to get rid of him? I mean, he didn't concuss Mitchell Robinson. He didn't draft Frank Ntilikina, who would have been great in the triangle, not so much in Fizdale's system. Okay, he didn't make Kevin Knox suck. Okay, I mean, he's got a very talented rookie on his roster, and if they don't get their stuff together, that's going to stunt his development, because I do believe Barrett has potential to be an all-star. I mean, he's averaging close to 18 points a game, has looked the part, and he's been thrust into this point guard role because they don't have anybody else. It's not a fair situation, and I'm very interested to see how this shakes out. But what this boils down to is I think they have to fire him now, but it's not fair or justifiable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would pull the trigger, just because, I mean, I don't really know where you're going if you fire him, because you clearly don't have someone to replace him. So I don't know. At the end of the day, it's just Knicks doing Knicks stuff. On the flip side of this, Jason, we have some teams that are really, I mean, surprisingly good. I think when we talked coming into the season, one of the teams that we had trouble reading, but we thought ultimately might even regress a little bit, was the Boston Celtics. This was a team that lost debatably their best two players in the offseason with Al Horford and Kyrie Irving, guys who were really thriving in new locations too, may we add. I mean, Horford has been great for the Sixers, and obviously Kyrie Irving, one of the leading scorers in the league with the Nets. So, I mean, it's not like these guys were not doing well since they've left. But nonetheless, the Celtics lead the league in an 8-1 record, and, Jason, may I add, have the number one point differential in the NBA of plus 9.4. They are in an 8-game winning streak after losing the opening game to the Sixers. They're 4-0 at home. They look like world beaters. However, Gordon Hayward, who had been resurgent this year, playing some of the best basketball of his career, a guy who was averaging 19 points a game, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, really doing everything for this team, breaks his hand, now going to be out 4 to 6 weeks, they say, Jason. What do you make of the injury, and what do you make of the Celtics team and the way that they've played so far?
This is a bit of a double-edged sword, because first off, you have to feel for Gordon Hayward. He played in 6 minutes of the season 2 years ago. Last year, with all the drama with Kyrie and the roster not really clicking, was trying to work his way back. And that just goes to show how serious the injury was, because it took him almost 2 years to regain his full health. And the second he does that, and he's becoming, the second option or the third option, depending on Tatum, in Brad Stevens' offense, and to go and fracture his hand like that, it's tough. You have to feel for Gordon Hayward. Thankfully, it's only a 6-week injury, because I thought this had potential to derail Boston's season, because he has been a key contributor. And 6 weeks puts him back right around, I want to say, the start of 2020. So if he comes back early January,